This is Aaron Murakami with eMediaPress.com and the Energy Science and Technology Conference, EnergyScienceConference.com. And we're here with Eric Dollard at the shop in Spokane. And as you know, we've been working on this project with the audio rack that you see on the left side of the video. Immediately behind Eric is the RF rack. Only the power supply is in there, but we have multiple components we're working on that will go into that rack. To the right side of Eric is a Collins transmitter that we've been experimenting, doing some experiments with these Tesla coils that you see on the right side. And so coming up here in July 7th through 11th is going to be the 10th annual Energy Science and Technology Conference. And at this conference there'll be about 18 presenters and maybe about 20 presentations jam-packed over a 5-day period in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho at the Kootenai County Fairgrounds. So Eric's primary presentation is on Fortescue, which is an extension of his one of his two presentations last year. Last year there was a presentation on Fortescue and one on Heaviside. And do you want to take a minute and kind of explain what the Fortescue presentation is going to be covering at this upcoming conference?
Yeah, it's going to be an application to delta and Y connected power systems and how to perform the conversion process between delta and Y, which is generally not understood or misunderstood. So the mathematical theory of the delta and Y connections is going to be presented in terms of the Fortescue equations and along with a lot of versor diagrams.
So what is your interest in this Fortescue concept? Because it seems like this would be more applicable to, or somebody would be more interested if they're on the power engineering level, working with the grid or something like that. Is this of use to like the average electrical engineer out there?
The Fortescue method and the Steinmetz method are the primary standards of electrical engineering mathematics. So the Fortescue method is like an extension of the Steinmetz method, using what are called versor operators, wrongly called imaginary numbers. Imaginary number is an obsolete term from the 18th century that seems to persist. So the Fortescue method allows for analysis of geometric power systems like 3-phase, 6-phase, and all that, which I gave in my last presentation. So the interest with the delta Y transformation is kind of more relevant now because there seems to be some kind of mass psychosis to multiple Y connect the entire power grid with a lot of bad effects. I'm not really going to get into any of that level of it, but I'm just going to show the geometric relationship between the delta and Y connections and how to calculate the conversion from going from one system to the other. Kind of, like I say, a specialization of the last presentation, which got all the way off into Pythagorean numerology and the music of Bach. This is going to be more towards like transformer connections and what those transformer connections do from the mathematical analysis standpoint.
So on this topic of the versor algebra, there's two books published in ebook and in paperback. On eMediaPress.com you can find the versor algebra 1 and 2, or you can go to Amazon and you can type Eric Dollard's name and you'll see the versor algebra 1 and the versor algebra 2 books. Do you want to give a brief synopsis of what the part 1 and part 2 cover?
Well, part 1 is kind of laying the groundwork for how to go from conventional exponential mathematical theory to the Fortescue method. And then part 2 is like an extension of that, starting to get into actual applications to specific geometries like 6-phase, 7-phase, complicated systems, some of which are not found in practice, but from the numerological standpoint they're interesting. And then my last presentation would be called Versor Algebra 3 if it was written and published, and then this is going to be, presentation is going to be Versor Algebra 4. So what the last presentation did was take the material in 1 and 2, which is kind of speculative and experimental, and then bring it down to an actual system of mathematics which is unlike any other kind of mathematics that's in existence presently. What's remarkable is the mathematicians really shy away from this because it's an engineer's mathematics and they don't like it, but it's when the Fortescue method first came out, various mathematicians pointed out that this was a major advancement in the theory of mathematics, not only the theory of numbers, but solving higher order equations via the Fortescue method.
Now, another presentation, which will be a co-presentation with you and me, dealing with this cosmic induction generator, flame speaker in this project. And this is going to be more relevant to the hardware that you can see in the back of the video here. So the audio rack to the left side of the screen, most of that was done in the fall of last year. It's about 95% done, just needs some testing. Most of this equipment will not be used at the conference because there's not enough time to put the radio frequency rack together, but we are putting together enough to do a few basic demonstrations. And do you want to briefly cover a few of the points of why people should be coming to this conference and what they're going to be learning?
Well, this is an approach to the Tesla transformer that really has not been taken before. So its purpose is not to generate sparks, even though it will do that, and that is something of more entertainment value. And the plasma are, of course, their own interests, but the whole concept of how the Tesla transformer operates has really been muddled up, just like in the Fortescue system and polyphase power. The relationship between the delta and Y is really muddled up. So this particular unit, which is sitting here, is being operated unlike any other, in that there's no primary or secondary coil. And the magnification factor of it is absolutely extraordinary. So the objective here basically is to increase the intensity of resonance to levels that have never really been done before.
And people will look at these and think that they're primaries, especially when they see the potential coils. And this is what you stated in your Colorado Springs presentation back in 2019, I believe. And which is that you can completely get away from the primary secondary coils, which everybody is pretty dedicated and addicted to. What was the context that Tesla discussed that you can get rid of the primary and secondary?
Well, Tesla understood right in the beginning, and I point that out of the Colorado Springs notebook, that it's the extra coil that does the work. The primary and secondary is just the source of high-frequency power. In this case, the source of high-frequency power is this Collins 32V transmitter. So there's no need for the primary and secondary. So the extra coil, in this case, the extra coil is broken into two parts, part for the current standing wave component and part for the potential standing wave component, which gives it the appearance of a primary and secondary, but it's not. The whole thing is series fed as a monopolar network driven by the input transformer. So the reason you have to have two of them, so in order to go from a bipolar electromagnetic condition to a longitudinal monopolar, you have to have two monopolar transformers out of phase.
So what are some of the demonstrations, and what are you going to teach with some of these demonstrations that we can show, such as the disappearance of energy, so to speak?
Well, that's what I'm really focusing on, is this because we're dealing with, in the layman's term, they always think of the fourth dimension, and the other side, going into another dimension, which is not really the right word, but physicists have put these words in people's mouths. So what's happening here is this transmitter will be delivering full output power into this thing when it's tuned to resonance. Here we're just using the current coils to get the frequency to match the transmitter and to keep the impedance down. The question is where is that energy going? It's evidently going into another so-called dimension, because the coils don't generate heat to speak of, there's no light. There's no electromagnetic waves. So if nothing's getting hot, nothing's moving, and nothing's radiating, where does the 100 watts out of the transmitter go? It's the laws of conservation of energy are defied in that the energy that this thing is pulling is running the kilowatt hour meter and you're paying for it, but there's no evidence of it after it disappears into the network.
And this is related to what you call the neutral spot or the neutral plane, where you can, for example, on a balanced operation on the multi-wave oscillators, or even with this, if you put a fluorescent tube directly between the coils, there's a black spot that appears, and you would say that that is like the doorway into counter space, or the doorway into the different dimension, or the other side.
Yeah, conceivably.
And it's not supposed to be there, because there's supposed to be enough high voltage potential there to basically illuminate the whole tube.
It depends on which electrical theory you use. In one electrical theory, it makes perfect sense. In another electrical theory, it doesn't make any sense. But undeniably, it's there, and the two monopolar potentials are canceling each other out. But generally, in any electrical configuration where you have two opposite polarities, there's a 0 point, and at that 0 point, there is no potential to light the fluorescent lamp up. Whereas the lines of force, according to the lines of force theory, the lines of force are going through. So somehow the lines of force theory breaks down when you get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Where the energy is going is still undefined, but it would seem to me that that has something to do with it. So the question is, if the energy is going somewhere, then can it be recovered from there? Can you take the energy to the other side and then bring it back to this side again?
Mm-hmm. And so besides demonstrating what seems to be the destruction of energy, so to speak, there'll also be a demonstration of the flame speaker, which is, you've been doing this for years at various sizes and, pretty big, large scale. This will be a little bit of a smaller scale until we have, the full RF rack complete, and that's more of a I guess entertainment value, but it's still pretty shocking at the clarity and the fidelity of it. For you, what is the significance of the flame speaker and what that's demonstrating?
Well, it's mostly for its entertainment value, but then it kind of starts to get into a thing where the flame starts to take the shape of the music, and it gets back to my music television ideas and the concept of antiquity, that the music was actually like a living entity in space and had a body to it.
So it's almost like an electrical flame version of cymatics, where a sound has this geometry to it.
Yeah, but we haven't got to that point yet. That's what makes the equipment that's getting built so complicated, is to keep the modulation with the right amount of symmetry and asymmetry and carrier magnitude and all that type of stuff requires a rather sophisticated transmitter. There's about 3 different forms of entry points for the modulation that have to be all coordinated, so that the flame varies with the size of the music, where normally any attempts thus far to do this type of stuff have been with a continuous wave flame, which wastes a lot of power and makes the music harder to hear, or just square wave chop up that has an audio tone to it, which is not very musical, because you couldn't play a violin or anything into something like that. It would just hash it all up.
Yeah, and a lot of the demonstrations on YouTube or other video sites with these Tesla coil speakers, the quality of the sound is kind of like a 1980s Mario Brothers video game, which is very poor and does not have that kind of fidelity, but when people hear it out of here, it's very crisp, very clear. It's actually pretty profound.
Now the other thing is also to get, when it goes into the pulse mode, then that starts to produce those fractal discharges. And no one has really been able to do that yet, because they're not using a master oscillator power amplifier configuration. They're just using a self-oscillating. And if you use a self-oscillating configuration, you cannot get the phase angle right to get the geometric patterns. You'll be stuck on one side, pretty much the inductive side, and you won't be able to optimize it. Where here, there's actual master oscillator, and the coils themselves are not determining the operating frequency. The master oscillator is determining the operating frequency, because it's just inherent in oscillators. When they take off on their own, they don't really land on the frequency that the coils and capacitors decide, but there's an offset that the tube constants and circuit losses and all that. So any one of these self-oscillating things, why it might produce the necessary size flame, it's not really, you can't get the angle where you need it to really make the thing take shape. So the fundamental thing about this whole transmitter system that's connecting to this is all of these factors are highly controllable. That's what makes it so complicated to build.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's a lot of different control elements going into this. And the other thing is most of this comes out of my early research involved with RCA when I was in high school, and then later when I actually moved out to the RCA facility and did these experiments. So that's where I discovered the fractal discharge and how to control it, and also to get the right coil resonances and what have you, and to design the transmitters so that this stuff would operate without basically trying to get the maximum power out of the tubes. And there's techniques that I use where I can get twice as much power out of a set of transmitting tubes as normally possible. This is something that I developed with the equipment provided to me by RCA when I was in high school. I managed to get plate efficiencies as high as 92%, which is almost impossible to achieve with tetrode vacuum tubes normally, but I did it.
So these golden ratio discharges, that's something that we will be able to demonstrate?
Not this time around.
Not this time?
No, that's what requires really high power equipment.
And that's a photo on the front of one of Peter's books, right?
Yeah.
So Peter Lindemann has a book called Free Energy Secrets of Cold Electricity, and that book is kind of his thesis on how he was thinking the Ed Gray motor works. But anyway, on the cover of that is a golden ratio discharge coming off of the top of a coil, and that is one of your builds.
That was
a long
at the
time ago.
Integratron. Yeah,
Integratron. Okay.
That was a 2,000 watt unit.
Okay, and that was the golden ratio discharge.
Yeah, and then when the thing got further developed and then had to be moved to Santa Barbara, that's when I came up with the musical discharge and with all the fancy modulators and whatever, and that was about 5 kW, and the results were surreal. Absolutely surreal. So that's what I'm trying to duplicate now.
And this will be about 1/3 that power?
This one will be, it'll be, I would say about 1/3, yeah.
About 1/3 or so?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so at the Energy Science and Technology Conference, the 10th annual one, Eric will be there live. We'll be presenting on this. He'll be presenting on his Fortescue presentation, and there'll be about 16, 17 other presentations. There's going to be more live demonstrations of different machines at this conference than we've ever had before. And already about 40% of all the tickets are sold out. You can go to energyscienceconference.com. The main details are on the home page. You can look at the schedule of events on the 2021 event schedule in the main menu bar, or you can look at the speaker bio link for 2021, and you can look at who's presenting and what the talk titles and descriptions are. And there's also a secret presenter coming from overseas. We're not going to say who that is yet, but he's going to be disclosing his technology for the first time ever to the public. So get your ticket and we'll see you there. Also, be on the lookout for a new paperback on Amazon by Eric Dollard. It is a collection of 2 papers, The Electrical Utility in the Digital Age and Revival of the Science of Electricity in the Digital Age. And that should be available on Amazon this month, May. So go to emediapress.com, join the Energy Times newsletter, and you'll be one of the first to learn about when this book comes out. And if you can give a brief description of what that paperback is about.
Okay, so the first part is the electrical utility in the digital age. As most people know, I've been pointing out how the whole electrical utility system is really being thrown into a state of wreckage. It's really baffling as to what could possibly be behind such outrageousness. But at any rate, what I'm doing is I'm showing how throughout the various eras of electrical technology, the electrical age, the electronic age, and then finally the digital age, is how the electrical system has gone from that conceived by Tesla and Steinmetz into something that's so convoluted and so fundamentally archetypically wrong and incorrect and senseless. So I kind of give a short history of how that progressed and how each one of the bad ideas was introduced into practice. And that is basically just a little kind of a synopsis of what I present in the my presentation called The Electrical Utility and what was it there? History, Theory, and Practice of the Electrical Utility System, where I get into all this stuff in depth. It actually consists of 4 presentations, all in tandem. So
it's about 5 hours.
Yeah, it's about 5 hours. And then the revival of the science of electricity in the digital age, that was something that I worked on when I was living in the forest in my car in Oregon. Is I had all the books of the greats like Kennelly and Heaviside, Larmor, J.J. Thompson, Le Bon, a number of people, Maxwell, Hertz, and I spent about a year going through all those books and showing with their own words how the whole concept of electricity kind of got more and more mucked up until eventually it was just regarded as alchemy and buried by physics. And that is loaded with all the references, so every sentence or page or everything of significance that I came across, I made sure that those references are in the back so that anybody can go to those books and read it on their own and get the context that it came out of. That was a very lengthy effort. It took almost a year to put that. Just a few pages, but those are a pretty concentrated few pages together.
Okay, so again, join Energy Times at emediapress.com, and we'll send out a notification as soon as that paperback is available. Thanks for watching.